They didn't just change the locks. They tried to erase me from the very walls I built. The taxi slowed at the curb. My body still ached from the hospital stay, but all I wanted was my chair in the living room, the smell of my wife's roses drifting through the back window. Home. But my key didn't fit. The lock turned stiff, foreign. I jiggled it once, twice, then tried again. Nothing. My hand trembled as I bent lower, my suitcase slipping from my grip. Looking for this. Eric's voice cut the air. My son, my blood. He stood on the porch with Carla at his side, arms folded like guards. "Why won't my key work?" I asked. Carla tilted her head. "We had the locks changed, for your safety." My eyes darted to the suitcase at Eric's feet. Mine, packed sloppily, clothes crammed in like trash. Eric didn't flinch when he said it. "Dad, it's time you move on. Don't come back." The words stung sharper than shrapnel. I stepped closer, cane digging into the wood. "Move on, this is my house." "No, Dad," Eric said coldly. "It was your house. You can't manage it anymore. Carla and I will take care of things." Carla smirked. "We're doing what's best for you." Best for me, throwing me onto the porch like a delivery they forgot to sign for. "I raised you in this house," I rasped. "Your mother, she died here." Eric's eyes darted away, guilt flickering before it hardened again. "You're tired. You need rest somewhere safer." "Where do you expect me to go?" "There's a motel down by the highway," Carla said flatly. The ground felt unsteady under my feet. My wife's laughter used to echo in those walls. Now I was locked out of it, replaced, erased. Thought thee. My hands shook, not from age but from betrayal. The boy I taught to ride a bike, to salute the flag, he was treating me like a burden. I bent, lifted the suitcase with what strength I had. "This isn't over." Eric's voice followed me down the steps. "Dad, just let it go." I didn't look back. If I had, I might have broken. At the curb, I stopped and steadied myself on the cane. The roses my wife planted along the fence were blooming. Pink. Bright. Unaware that the house they guarded had turned into a stranger. I whispered to her memory, "They won't take this from me. Not while I breathe." The taxi driver glanced at me in the mirror as I slid inside. "Everything all right, sir?" I forced a thin smile. "No, but it will be." Flashback. Her voice soft in memory. "Arthur promised me, don't let anyone take what we built. Not even him, especially him." The motel room smelled of bleach and dust. I sat on the edge of the bed, suitcase at my feet, staring at the single dim lamp. My whole life had narrowed to 4 cheap walls. But Marines don't surrender. We regroup, we plan. As I lay back, staring at the ceiling fan creaking above, I thought of all the other men who carried their battles long after the guns went silent. Some lost to time, some lost to silence. Whisper. If someone's listening, don't let silence swallow your story. That night I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I remembered. Every word Eric spoke, every smirk Carla gave. I sharpened them in my mind like bayonets. Because this wasn't just about a house. It was about memory. It was about dignity. It was about proving I was still here. Closing thought. They told me not to come back, and maybe I won't, but my lawyer will. With a court order they'll never forget. You don't really know what betrayal feels like until you hear your own blood call you disposable. The motel clerk didn't even look at me when he slid the key across the counter. Plastic tag. Room 12. His eyes barely left the TV mounted in the corner. To him, I was just another tired old man looking for a place to rot. The room smelled of bleach trying too hard to hide mildew. The light buzzed overhead, stuttering in a rhythm that made my temples ache. The carpet was worn thin in the middle, stained with the stories of other people's failures. This wasn't home, not by a mile. I dropped my suitcase on the bed and sat down heavy. The springs groaned like they might snap. I rubbed the scar on my forearm, a reminder of a war half a century ago, and told myself this was just another temporary post. Marines don't retreat, we regroup. From the front pocket of the suitcase, I pulled out a small leather wallet. Inside was the photo I always carried. Margaret, my wife, arm linked through mine at the Veterans Day parade. Her smile brighter than the sun that afternoon. I traced her face with my thumb. "What would you say now, Margaret?" Her voice came back in memory, clear as if she were in the room. "Don't let him forget where he comes from, Arthur. Don't let anyone rewrite what we built." The silence after her voice felt heavier than any battlefield. Eric hadn't just locked me out of a house. He'd locked me out of the last piece of her. Our home was where she cooked Sunday dinners, where she planted roses, where she took her last breath. And now he stood there with Carla, smiling as if it were theirs to claim. I leaned back against the headboard. The buzzing light above flickered again. My cane rested against the wall, my suitcase half-zipped on the bed. "Dad, don't come back." Eric's words replayed in my head like a broken tape. I clenched my fists, not from weakness but from rage. The motel phone rang once. I froze, then twice. I picked it up on the third ring. "Mr. Hayes," the clerk said, "just checking you're settled in." "I'm fine," I lied. He paused, probably hearing the gravel in my voice. "All right then, good night." I set the receiver down, staring at it for a long moment. Even strangers pretended to care more than my own son. Thought he. Eric had taken my house, my dignity, and tried to take my place in the family. But he hadn't taken everything. I still had my service records, honorable discharge, medals, commendations, every detail documented, proof of who I was, not a confused old man, not forgetful. I still had my memory. Every conversation, every slight, every look Carla gave me like I was already in the ground. I remembered them all. And most of all, I still had instinct. The same gut that had kept me alive in ambushes now told me this. They weren't done. The forged smiles, the locks changed, the suitcase packed. It wasn't just about forcing me out. They had plans, bigger ones. The lamp on the nightstand hummed as I clicked it off. The room sank into darkness. Outside, a neon sign blinked vacancy through the thin curtains. I lay on the bed, clutching Margaret's photo to my chest, whispering into the dark, "They think I'm finished, but I'm not by a damn mile." Closing thought. Betrayal cuts deepest when it's blood. And tonight my blood made it clear I was disposable, but I wasn't done. Not yet. Paper doesn't bleed, but when it's forged by your own blood, it cuts deeper than any knife. The motel room was quiet, except for the hum of the old air conditioner. I sat on the edge of the bed, suitcase half open, clothes spilling out like guts. I started folding them, trying to impose order on a life that had just been shattered. That's when I remembered. Carla standing in my kitchen 2 months back, sorting mail like she owned the place. I'd asked, "What's that envelope?" She waved it off. "Just mail, nothing important." Her eyes had flickered then, a quick dart away like a thief caught mid-act. I should have pressed harder. I dug through the side pocket of my suitcase where I shoved odds and ends. Old receipts, a crumpled grocery list, Margaret's rosary. My fingers brushed thick paper. An envelope. The same one. The return address read, Franklin County Clerk's Office. My stomach sank. Hands shaking, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet, heavy paper, official seal. Quitclaim deed. I read it once, twice. My name stared back at me, but not the way it should. Grantor Arthur Hayes, grantee Eric Hayes. My signature scrawled at the bottom, but it wasn't mine, not even close. The loops were wrong, the pressure uneven. Whoever forged it thought shaky hands meant authenticity. They mistook age for incompetence. I whispered into the room, "You son of a..." The air conditioner rattled louder, like the walls wanted to cover my words. They hadn't just locked me out, They hadn't just taken my keys. They stolen everything with ink. The land, the house, Margaret's roses, every nail and board I had worked for, gone on paper. Thought thee. My chest burned, not from the years or the scars of war, but from betrayal you can't shoot your way out of. I stood and paced the small room, deed in one hand, photo of Margaret in the other. Not yet, Margaret, not over. I thought back to when we signed the original deed. 1978. Margaret's hand steady as she scrawled her name, my hand tight around the pen, pride swelling because the house was ours. Paid with sweat, built with hope. Now a fake version mocked it, a stranger's hand trying to bury mine. The phone rang again. I snatched it up, breath heavy. "Front desk," the clerk said. "Everything all right, Mr. Hayes?" I stared at the paper in my hand. "No," I said, "but it will be." I hung up before he could answer. I spread the deed on the desk under the lamp. The yellow light made the ink glisten. It was sloppy work, but to someone who didn't know me, it might pass. I clenched my jaw. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I'd forget. But I remember every damn stroke of my own hand. Flashback. Eric as a boy, perched at the table asking me how to write his name in cursive. I'd guided his small hand across the paper. "Control your pen like you control your breath," I said. And now that same boy thought he could forge mine. I folded the paper carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it inside Margaret's rosary case. My evidence, my first weapon. I sat back down on the bed, the motel ceiling closing in on me. But this time it didn't suffocate. Because I wasn't empty-handed anymore. Closing thought. They thought they'd erased me with a stroke of a pen. But that paper wasn't their victory, it was my proof. And proof is where revenge begins. In war, you learn two things: never fight alone, and never let the enemy pick the battlefield. The forged deed lay on the desk, the motel lamp casting a dirty yellow glow over it. My fingers tapped against the paper, a restless rhythm of anger I couldn't quiet. I'd stared at it for hours, but rage wasn't enough. Rage never won battles. Strategy did. That's when his name came to me, Jack Reynolds. Marine buddy, lawyer now, a man who knew both trenches and courtrooms. If anyone could understand betrayal wrapped in paperwork, it was him. I dialed the number from memory. My hand shook, not from age, but from the weight of calling in a brother after so many years. The line clicked. "Reynolds." "Jack, it's Arthur." A pause, then his voice warmed. "Arthur Hayes, well, I'll be damned, been too long, brother." "Yeah," I said, my throat tightening, "too long." He chuckled, but it faded quick. "What's wrong? You wouldn't be calling unless something's wrong." I looked at the envelope, my mouth dry. "Jack, they forged my name, my son and his wife, locked me out of my house, changed the deed, said I shouldn't come back." Silence stretched on the line, heavy. "Arthur," he said finally, his voice low and sharp, "you still got the document." I looked at the paper again, the fake signature mocking me. "Yeah, right here." His tone hardened like steel. "Good, that's the first bullet in our chamber." I closed my eyes, letting that sink in. For days I'd felt stripped bare, powerless. But in those words, "first bullet," the weight shifted. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. "Jack," I whispered, "they treated me like I was already gone, like I was just dead weight." He didn't hesitate. "You're not gone, Arthur, you're calling me. That means you're standing, and if you're standing, we fight." The memories came rushing back. Jack and I crouched in mud, rounds cracking over our heads. His voice then was the same as now, calm, firm, unshakable. Back then he said, "We'll hold this line." Now he said, "We'll take back your house." I swallowed the knot in my throat. "Can you meet me?" "Tomorrow morning. Where are you?" "Motel off Highway 7, room 12. "Got it, don't talk to anyone else. Don't move that deed, I'll be there." After we hung up, I sat there with the receiver in my hand, staring at nothing. My heart still pounded, But for the first time since Eric shut that door in my face, it wasn't from panic. It was from hope. Flashback. Margaret's voice, soft and steady. Don't let him forget where he comes from. I remembered telling her once that Eric was smart, ambitious. She'd frowned. Smart doesn't mean good, Arthur. Keep your eyes open. My eyes were open now. The motel ceiling no longer pressed down on me. It felt higher, like I could breathe again. I folded the deed carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, then tucked it inside Margaret's rosary case. As I set it on the nightstand, I whispered, "First bullet." I imagined Jack walking through the door tomorrow, broad-shouldered, still sharp-eyed, carrying both his Marine grit and his lawyer's briefcase. And I imagined Eric's face when he realized his forgetful old man wasn't fighting alone. Closing thought. For the first time in days, I felt the weight shift. They thought they'd buried me under silence, but tomorrow, silence would have a voice, and that voice would be mine. Revenge isn't rage. Rage burns too hot too fast. Revenge is patience sharpened into a blade. The knock came at 8 a.m. sharp. One knock, solid, familiar. I opened the door and there he was, Jack Reynolds. Still broad in the shoulders, hair gone silver but eyes just as sharp as the day we marched through dust together. He carried a leather briefcase, worn at the edges, like it had seen its own kind of battles. "Arthur," he said, voice steady, "you look like hell." I managed a thin smile. "Feels about right." He stepped inside, scanning the motel room with a soldier's instinct. "You got it." I pulled the envelope from the nightstand, handing it to him like it was a loaded weapon. Jack laid it flat on the desk, slipped on his glasses and studied the deed. His lips pressed tight. "Forgery," he muttered, "sloppy one at that." He tapped the bottom. "Ink strokes don't match. Loops are inconsistent. This isn't even close to your real hand." I felt my chest tighten. "So it's real proof." Jack looked up, steel in his eyes. "It's the first nail in their coffin." He opened his briefcase, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "Here, what we need. First, medical evaluations. They'll try to claim you're incompetent, maybe senile. We shut that down with records. VA reports, doctor's notes, anything recent that says your mind's sharp." I nodded. "VA's got years on me. PTSD, sure, but nothing that says I can't run my own damn life." "Good," Jack said. "That's bullet number 2. He scribbled more notes. "Next, bank records. If they've been dipping into your accounts, rerouting statements, moving funds, we'll find it. Elder financial abuse is a felony. Judges don't look kindly on kids stealing from their parents." I clenched my fists. "They already sold my car, said it was for insurance." Jack's eyes narrowed. "We'll trace the money, follow the paper trail. Every dime they touched we'll nail to the wall." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Third, witnesses. Neighbors, friends, anyone who saw them lock you out, move your belongings, or spread lies about your mind going. The more voices we have, the stronger your case." I exhaled slow. "So we gather quietly." "Exactly," Jack said. "We let them believe they've won. Let them laugh. Arrogance always cracks wide open when the spotlight hits." Thought D. My instinct told me patience was the only weapon sharp enough for this fight. I'd survived ambushes by staying still, waiting for the right moment. This would be no different. Jack snapped his briefcase shut. "Arthur, they think you're beaten. That's their mistake. They think age makes you weak. They forgot age makes you dangerous because you remember." I felt something stir in my chest I hadn't felt in weeks. Strength. Not from fists, but from knowing I wasn't alone. I looked at Margaret's photo on the nightstand, her smile steady, eternal. I whispered to her memory, "We're coming for it, Margaret. What's ours?" Jack caught the glance. "She want you to fight." "She would," I said, "and she want me to fight smart." We sat for another hour, mapping the plan like a mission. Collect documents, secure medical proof, build a witness list. Every step was deliberate, careful. Just like patrols in the jungle, one wrong move and you don't come back. But this time I wasn't just fighting for survival. I was fighting for dignity, for memory, for Margaret. When Jack finally stood, he put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll hit them where it hurts, Arthur, paper for paper, word for word. By the time we're through, they'll wish they never underestimated you." Closing thought. Rage wanted me to kick down my own front door, but patience told me to wait, to sharpen every detail into proof. This wasn't surrender. This was preparation, and preparation wins wars. Words can be weapons if you know how to catch them. I learned that in war. I learned it again at my kitchen table. "Put it in your pocket," Jack said, tapping the small recorder on the motel desk like it was a grenade. "Let them talk." "Won't they notice?" I asked. My thumb traced the seam of the device. It fit in my palm like a quiet promise. "They'll notice nothing," Jack replied. "They'll be loud with victory. Arrogance makes people loud. Loud people give evidence away." That afternoon, I went home. The house still had the new locks and the same smugness in the curtains. Jenna was watering the roses, careful, polite, too careful. Carla sat on the porch talking on her phone, laughing like a woman who owned other people's futures. I slipped the recorder into my shirt pocket under my jacket and walked up the path like a neighbor returning. "Evening," Jenna said, eyes sliding past me as if I were a draft she couldn't close. "Evening," I said. Carla's laugh on the phone was bright. "Yeah, we're almost done. He's been such a pain, but you should see the papers, looks good." Her voice carried across the lawn. I stood pretending to admire the roses, cane in hand, the little recorder pressing warm against my ribs. My heart wanted to race. My training said stay steady. I breathed slow, measured, 1, 2, 3. Carla lowered the phone. "You know what? Once we sell, he'll be in a nice facility. He won't even remember the house." "Right," Jenna chimed in, smiling fragile like a child showing a scraped knee to be mended. "We'll get a good price. It'll solve everything." Thought they. Their voices, casual, hopeful, were the same ones that sealed ambushes and deals. In war, men said things when they thought they were safe. Here, they thought the same. Safety makes confessions easier. Carla laughed again. "I told my friend at the realty office. She said with the appraisal we could list by next month. He won't know a thing." Jenna's voice dropped. "Good, because if he fights, it'll be messy. Legal stuff takes time, and who has time when you're 80? "You're being cruel," I heard myself say before I meant to. The words came out soft, like an undercurrent. They both turned. Carla's smile stiffened. "Dad, I thought you weren't coming back." "I came to get my mail," I lied poorly. The recorder hummed against my chest like a tiny heart. Jack's voice echoed in my head from that morning. Let them talk. He sat across from me now in the temporary shelter of a neighbor's garage, listening to the playback with his hands folded. The little red light blinked as the device rewound. "Listen to that," he said, and hit play again. Carla's laughter filled the small space, bright, stupid, greedy. "He won't even remember the house once we sell it." Jack didn't smile. "That line will sink them." I felt relief, surprising and sharp. Not because they were exposed, but because the truth finally had weight beyond my memory. Memory alone can be dismissed as confusion. Paper and recorded words, those are harder to deny. "Now the bank records," Jack said. "We pair this with money movement and a doctor's note that says you're competent. It becomes a story the court can't ignore." "And witnesses?" I asked. "Neighbors?" "We need them," he said. "Someone to say they saw them change the locks. Someone to say they heard Carla on the phone." Thought he. I remembered standing under mortar fire, listening for the enemy through static and shouting. You learned to pick out the true sounds, the ones that meant movement, that meant danger. Now the sounds were different, but the principle was the same. Listen for the truth inside noise. That night I slept in the old recliner in the den where my wife used to sit. the recorder tucked beneath my shirt like a talisman. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, crickets, a distant dog. Inside, the house felt like a tide that had receded, revealing old stones. On the kitchen table, the device sat untouched, light blinking its slow heartbeat. I ran my thumb over the small red eye, thinking of Jack's words and of Margaret's voice telling me not to let anyone rewrite my life. They could steal my house, my money, even my name on paper. But when they took my medal, they touched the one thing I earned in blood. I noticed it when I woke up, the little box where I kept my bronze star empty. I searched the drawer twice, then 3 times. My hands grew cold as I checked the nightstand, the suitcase, even the pockets of the coat I hadn't worn since winter. Nothing. I asked Rachel at breakfast. She barely looked up from her coffee. "Maybe it's at the VA," she said, her tone dismissive, like medals just wandered off. "It doesn't walk itself," I muttered. She shrugged, lips curling into something almost like a smirk. "You misplace things, Dad. It happens." Thought D. I'd misplaced many things in life. Keys, wallet, directions in the fog of memory, but not this. Never this. That medal wasn't just metal. It was proof I'd made it home when so many didn't. I called Charlie that afternoon. My old neighbor, half my age but sharp as a tech guy. "Charlie," I said, voice tight, "I think they took my medal." "Your bronze star." His tone sharpened immediately. "That's not something you just lose." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Let me do some digging, don't ask how, just give me a couple hours." When the call came back, I already knew. "It's online," Charlie said. "eBay, seller out of Phoenix, guess who? Bryce's cousin, same last name, same profile pic from Facebook." I closed my eyes, the motel ceiling spinning. "Send me the link." A ding in my inbox, and there it was. My medal, the ribbon worn from years of sunlight on my dresser, a blurry photo of my name etched into the back, listed for $1,200. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. My pulse didn't even spike. Combat taught me how to bury explosions inside. I just clicked print. The motel printer sputtered out a grainy screenshot, the listing plain as day. I slipped it into a manila folder. On the front, I wrote in black marker, Exhibit A. When Jack arrived later, I slid the folder across the table. He opened it, brows tightening. "They're selling your medals now?" he asked. "They're selling me," I said flatly, "piece by piece." He set the paper down, slow. "This isn't just fraud, Arthur. This is character. Any judge, any jury, this shows motive, shows contempt." I nodded. Every humiliation is ammunition now. Flashback. I remembered the day they pinned it on me. Dust in the air, sweat down my back, Margaret waiting at home, praying I'd make it back. The medal was never about honor. It was about survival, about the men who didn't come home. And now, my son's family had reduced it to a price tag. Jack packed up the folder, his face carved in stone. "Exhibit A," he repeated, "but not the last one." "No," I said, "not the last one." That night, alone in the motel room, I stared at the empty drawer where the medal used to sit. My reflection in the mirror looked tired, but not broken. I whispered to Margaret's picture, "They think they've stripped me, but all they've done is give me more to fight with." Closing thought. Every insult, every theft, every sneer, they weren't victories. They were evidence, and I would carry each one into the courtroom like rounds into battle. The best revenge isn't shouting in anger. It's rewriting the story so the betrayers no longer have a in it. Charlie sat across from me at the motel's small desk, laptop open, fingers moving like a pianist. "Arthur, I've got someone for you," he said. "Sharp, tough, knows elder law like the back of her hand. Name's Naomi Alvarez." "Marine?" I asked, half smiling. Charlie grinned. "Daughter of one, she fights like it." The next morning, Naomi walked in with a briefcase and eyes that could cut glass. She shook my hand firmly, no pity in her grip. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "Charlie filled me in. Let's talk about taking your family's toys away." I blinked. Toys. Your estate, your will, your assets. They've treated them like playthings. Time to remind them these are yours. She spread papers across the table. My old will, copies of deeds, financial notes Charlie had pulled. Your current will leaves portions to Eric and his side. That's leverage they think they have. We're going to take it away. I swallowed hard. You mean rewrite it? Her nod was precise. Completely. You remove them. You decide where it goes. That way, if they keep pressing, they're pressing for nothing. And when they find out, their faces will be Exhibit B. Thought D. I thought of Margaret then. We sat in the living room years ago, whispering about leaving something for the children, about legacy. But legacy is trust, and trust, once broken, doesn't get stitched back together. Naomi's pen moved swiftly. Who do you want as beneficiaries? I stared at Margaret's picture on the nightstand before answering. The veteran housing nonprofit. Men and women who fought like I did, who need a roof. She nodded, writing it down. And Clara, I added, the nurse who checks on me every week. She never treated me like a burden. She deserves something. And Naomi asked gently. My wife's scholarship fund, I whispered. Margaret wanted it for young teachers. Let that dream live. Naomi tapped the page. Good, that's clean, that's bulletproof. Now power of attorney. You'll transfer it to me as your lawyer with Charlie as a backup. Eric and Carla will have no access, no say. I nodded slowly. Done. Her eyes softened for a moment. You're stronger than they realize. Maureen, I said, voice gravelly, we don't die easy. By afternoon, the documents were signed, notarized, and stamped with the kind of weight even Carla's sneers couldn't brush aside. Naomi handed me 2 sealed envelopes. One copy goes in my office vault. Another you keep in your safe. And the third, I asked. She smiled thin. Keep it somewhere visible for showtime. Flashback. I remembered the night I carried Margaret over the threshold, both of us young, laughing, thinking the house would always be a place of love. If she could see it now, she'd tell me not to cry, but to fight. And this rewriting of my will was my fight. Jack arrived later that evening, and I laid the new documents on the table. They're out, I said simply. He flipped through the pages, whistling low. Rachel and Bryce. Gone, I confirmed. Nonprofits, veterans, Clara, Margaret's scholarship. He grinned. Arthur, you didn't just pull the rug out from under them. You burned the floorboards. Closing thought. They thought they'd inherit my life. Instead, I handed my life to those who would honor it. The new will wasn't just paper. It was justice in ink. And when the day came, I'd let them see it with their own eyes. Greed makes people bold. Fear makes them sloppy. Jack sat across from me at the motel table, hands folded, eyes sharp. We don't strike yet, he said. We wait for them to crack. Pressure does the work if you let it. I frowned, and if they don't crack? He leaned back, lips curling in a half-smile. Carla will. She's not built for patience. She'll want the finish line before the race is done. He was right. 2 nights later, a neighbor knocked on my motel door, Mrs. Turner from across the street, a widow who'd brought casseroles after Margaret's funeral. Her eyes carried concern. Arthur, she said softly, I overheard something tonight. I let her in, heart hammering. Carla was on the porch with a glass of wine, talking too loud. She said, Mrs. Turner hesitated, glancing at the recorder Jack had placed on the table. Go on, I urged. She said, why isn't this done yet? What if he fights back? The words hung heavy in the stale motel air. Thought D. So she was worried. The cracks were forming. They thought I was weak, but doubt had wormed into their walls. Fear, I knew, eats faster than hunger. Mrs. Turner clasped her hands together. I didn't want to get involved, Arthur, but hearing her say that, it didn't sit right. I reached across, steadying her hands. You already did the hardest part, listening. Would you be willing to testify if it comes to that? She hesitated, then nodded firmly. Yes, Margaret was my friend, she'd want me to. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you. When she left, Jack leaned forward, his voice calm. That's our first witness. Fear is leaking out of their mouths and the neighbors are listening. I exhaled slow, almost smiling. Fear makes people sloppy. Jack pointed at me with his pen. Exactly. The tighter they hold your home, the quicker their grip will slip, and when they slip, we'll be there with the net. Later that night, I sat by the window watching headlights pass on the highway. Carla's words echoed. What if he fights back? I whispered to the glass, I am fighting back. You just don't see it yet. Flashback. I remembered nights overseas when the enemy grew restless, firing shots into the dark out of nerves. That's when you knew they were scared, because fear makes noise. Fear breaks discipline. Carla had just fired her first shot into the dark. The next morning, Jack filed Mrs. Turner's statement, crisp and official. This goes in the folder, he said. Exhibit B. I watched him slide the paper next to the forged deed and the screenshot of my medal on eBay. Each piece felt like loading another round. You think they'll keep slipping? I asked. Jack's jaw tightened. They already have. Fear doesn't stop halfway. It eats until there's nothing left. That evening, word drifted through the neighborhood. Carla's voice carried, whispers spread. By the time the sun set, 3 more neighbors had asked me quietly, is everything all right? I answered the same each time. Not yet, but it will be. Closing thought. They wanted to erase me in silence. But silence doesn't erase truth. It only makes it louder when it finally speaks. Carla's fear was the first sound of their downfall, and I wasn't done listening. Lies spread in whispers, but truth can roar when you let it out of the cage. The motel's meeting room smelled of old coffee and carpet cleaner. I hadn't been in a place like that since VFW potlucks years ago. Tonight, it wasn't casseroles and bingo, it was war council. Jack stood at the head of the table, briefcase open, papers neatly stacked. Beside him sat Naomi, her pen tapping lightly against her legal pad. Around the table were 6 faces I trusted. Mrs. Turner, Charlie, 2 neighbors from down the block, my old fishing partner Hank, and Reverend Johnson, who had baptized both Eric and Margaret. I cleared my throat, cane resting against the chair. Thank you for coming. I know it wasn't easy, but I can't fight this alone. Jack adjusted his glasses. Let's start with the facts. He held up the forged quitclaim deed, the county seal glinting under the fluorescent lights. This is what Eric and Carla are using to claim ownership of Arthur's home. Signature doesn't match, not notarized properly. It's fraud, plain and simple. Gasps rippled around the table. Hank muttered, Hell, I thought you just signed it over, figured you wanted peace. I shook my head, jaw tight. That's what they wanted you to think, that I was too tired, too confused. Naomi slid another paper across the table. Medical evaluation, signed by his VA doctor, states clearly, competent, alert, memory intact. No dementia, no decline. Mrs. Turner covered her mouth. Carla told us at church you were slipping. I leaned forward, voice low. Slipping. I remember every word, every lie, every humiliation. Charlie pulled out his phone, pressed play. Carla's voice filled the room. He won't even remember the house once we sell it. Gasps again. Reverend Johnson's brow furrowed deep. That's wicked, he said softly, to mock your own blood like that. Jack didn't flinch. He slid another sheet forward, a screenshot of my bronze star listed online, the blurry photo of my name etched in the back. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner. I'd felt shame when I first saw it online, but tonight that shame burned away. Tonight it wasn't just my pain, it was evidence. It was ammunition. Hank spoke up. Voice rough. Arthur, I need to apologize. We thought you were losing it. Eric said you forgot your bills, couldn't handle the house. We believed him. I nodded slowly. That's what they wanted, to turn silence into proof, but I was never gone. I was watching, waiting. Naomi leaned forward, her tone sharp. The truth spreads faster than lies when you give it oxygen. Tonight we breathe. Jack gathered the papers, stacking them neat again. We're building a case strong enough to walk into court and take back everything. But it won't just be the judge who hears it. Neighbors talk, friends talk, and by the time this spreads, Eric and Carla's story will already be cracking in public. Mrs. Turner's chin lifted. You'll have my statement. Word for word, I'll tell them what I heard. Reverend Johnson nodded. And mine. I'll say what I know, and I'll stand in court if I have to. I sat back, cane across my lap, a slow breath easing from my chest. For weeks I'd been locked out, silenced, erased. Tonight I wasn't alone. I wasn't invisible. Flashback. Margaret's voice again, laughing as we hosted backyard barbecues, neighbors gathered under string lights. Arthur, she'd whisper, you've got good people around you. Never forget that. I hadn't forgotten, and tonight they proved her right. When the meeting ended, hands were shaken, vows spoken. People hugged me, some with tears in their eyes. We're with you, they said. As the last door closed and silence returned to the motel, I whispered to the empty room. They thought they'd take my home, but tonight I started taking it back. Closing thought. Lies had kept me in the shadows, but shadows don't last when you gather light, and tonight the light was finally mine. Some punishments don't come from handcuffs or prison walls. Sometimes the heaviest sentence is shame. I sat in the passenger seat of Jack's Chevy as it rolled slow down my old street. The hum of the engine steadied my nerves. My cane rested across my lap, my hands tight on the wood. Jack glanced at me once. You ready? I nodded. Been ready since the day they locked me out. We parked at the corner, the house visible under the fading sun. The shutters were painted white now, Carla's doing. The flowers Margaret planted were gone, but it wasn't their house. Not legally, not anymore. Two sheriff's deputies stepped out of a cruiser parked behind us, papers in hand. Their uniforms caught the last streaks of daylight, badges shining. Neighbors had already gathered, Mrs. Turner on her porch, Reverend Johnson leaning against his fence, Hank and his wife, arms folded. Word had spread about tonight. Small towns don't keep secrets long. The deputies walked up the path, boots heavy against the pavement. Eric opened the door, Carla just behind him. Eric Hayes, the taller deputy asked. Yeah, what's this about? The deputy held out the envelope. You're being served. Pending charges, fraud, elder abuse, forgery. Gasps carried down the street. Murmurs followed. Carla's hand flew to her mouth, color draining from her face. Eric's voice cracked. What? That's insane. He's confused. He's lying. The shorter deputy pulled out a folded document, reading aloud. Medical evaluation by Dr. William Grant, VA Medical Center. Quote, patient is competent, stable, and fully capable of managing his affairs. The words hung in the air like a bell toll. Thought he. For weeks they painted me as a ghost, a man already gone. Tonight the truth spoke louder than their lies. Eric stepped off the porch, his face red, veins visible in his neck. You can't believe this. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's sick. I stepped out of Jack's car then, cane in hand, slow but steady. The crowd turned, eyes widening. I'm sick, I called out. My voice carried stronger than I expected. No, son, I'm alive. I remember everything. The murmurs rose again, whispers crossing lawns like fire on dry grass. Carla grabbed Eric's arm, whispering harshly, Stop, just stop. Her eyes darted at the neighbors, at the deputies, at me. Eric shook her off. This is wrong. He's trying to ruin us. Jack walked up beside me, his voice calm but sharp. No, Eric, you ruined yourselves. All Arthur did was remember. The taller deputy tucked the papers into Eric's chest. "You'll receive notice of your hearing date. Don't ignore it." Carla reached for the envelope, her hands trembling. For a moment, she looked like she might collapse. The street was silent except for the rustle of trees. Mrs. Turner's voice broke the quiet. "We believed you, Carla. We thought Arthur was slipping. Shame on you." Her words stung sharper than any gavel. Reverend Johnson bowed his head, whispering, "God sees everything." Flashback. I remembered Margaret standing on this porch years ago, handing cookies to neighbors, laughing with children. This house was built on love, not lies. To see it now, wrapped in fraud, felt like a wound. But tonight, the healing began. Eric's voice faltered. "Dad," it wasn't angry now. It was weak, broken, but I didn't answer. The deputies turned back toward their cruiser. Jack guided me into the car. The crowd still stared, whispering, shaking their heads. Through the window, I saw Carla slump against the doorway, envelope clutched to her chest. Eric stood frozen, lips pressed tight, as if words had finally failed him. Closing thought. They thought silence would erase me. Tonight, silence convicted them instead. And shame was the loudest sentence of all. In war, noise fills the air, gunfire, shouting, chaos. But in court, it's the silence after the truth lands that hits hardest. The courthouse smelled like varnish and dust, the kind that clings to your clothes. Jack walked beside me, briefcase in hand, Naomi on my other side with her sharp heels clicking against marble. Eric and Carla were already inside when I entered. Eric wore his best suit, the one I'd bought him for job interviews years ago. Carla dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her makeup already smudging. Their lawyer leaned toward them, whispering strategy. Jack leaned close. "Remember, let them talk. Lies dig their own graves." I nodded, gripping my cane tighter. The judge entered, robes flowing, voice steady. "Court is now in session." The clerk read the charges: fraud, elder abuse, forgery. Words that stung but felt truer than any insult my son had ever thrown. Eric stood first, charm dripping from his tone. "Your Honor, this is a family matter. My father's health has been declining. We only wanted to protect him, to manage things responsibly." Carla sniffled loudly. "We never wanted to hurt him. We love him. We just thought," her voice cracked, "we just thought he needed help." Their lawyer slid papers toward the bench, polished lies stacked neatly. Naomi rose, calm, cold. She placed our exhibits on the table. "Your Honor, what they call protection, we call theft. Exhibit A, quitclaim deed forged. Signature analysis proves it. Exhibit B, medical evaluation by VA doctor, stating Mr. Hayes is competent and stable. Exhibit C, audio recordings of the defendants themselves, mocking Mr. Hayes and discussing the sale of his home." The judge lifted a brow. "Audio recordings." Jack pressed play. Carla's voice filled the chamber. "He won't even remember the house once we sell it." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Carla's face drained white. Eric's hand clenched the table edge. Thought he. Charm and tears may sway a crowd, but documents don't cry. Recordings don't lie. Paper and proof, they stand even when your hands shake. The judge turned to me. His gaze was steady, heavy. "Mr. Hayes, do you understand these proceedings?" My breath came slow, but my voice didn't falter. "Yes, Your Honor. My son tried to erase me. I'm here to prove I exist." The silence that followed pressed against my chest, harder than any mortar blast. Even the ceiling fans seemed to pause. Eric shifted, desperate. "Dad, that's not what I meant. You know me, I'd never." I cut him off, steady. "I know exactly what you did, Eric. You forgot that I remember." Gasps echoed from the benches where neighbors sat. Mrs. Turner wiped a tear, Reverend Johnson nodded, and Hank muttered, "Damn right." Carla's lawyer scrambled, trying to redirect. "Your Honor, these are family grievances, twisted into something bigger than they are." But Naomi didn't flinch. "Bigger than they are. This is a decorated veteran defrauded by his own blood. This isn't just family squabble, it's elder abuse, financial exploitation, and fraud, plain and simple. The judge held up a hand, silencing the room. I've heard enough for now. The evidence is substantial. Closing arguments will proceed tomorrow. As the gavel struck, Eric slumped into his chair, sweat glistening on his forehead. Carla's tissue was soaked, hands trembling. Jack leaned toward me, whispering, "We broke their shield today. Tomorrow we pierce the heart." Flashback. I remembered a night in Vietnam, rain pelting metal helmets, the jungle thick with tension. Our captain whispered, "Hold your fire. Wait for the right moment." When the enemy stumbled into the clearing, confused, exposed, that's when we struck. Court was no different. Tonight, Eric and Carla stumbled. Tomorrow, they'd fall. As I stood to leave, Kane steady against the tile, I turned once toward my son. His eyes met mine, pleading, searching. But I gave him nothing. Not anger, not pity, just truth. Closing thought. They thought the courtroom would hide behind excuses and tears. But truth doesn't weep. Truth waits. And when it lands, it silences even the boldest lies. Revenge isn't about noise. It's not about shouting or fists. The sharpest blade in the world is a judge's pen. The courtroom felt colder that morning. Sunlight poured through tall windows, but it didn't warm the wood or the marble. Everyone was already there, neighbors whispering in the back row, Reverend Johnson sitting tall, Mrs. Turner clutching her purse like it was armor. Jack leaned beside me, calm as ever, while Naomi's legal pad sat ready with a clean page for the final notes. Eric and Carla sat 2 rows ahead. Eric's jaw was tight, eyes bloodshot. Carla kept her gaze low, tissue balled in her hand. Neither spoke. The judge entered, robe dark as midnight, and the room rose. When he sat, silence fell like a hammer. The matter of Arthur Hayes versus Eric Hayes and Carla Hayes is before this court for judgment, the clerk read. The judge adjusted his glasses, his voice deliberate. The evidence has been reviewed, the forged deed, the falsified claims of incompetence, the recordings, and the testimony of neighbors. The court finds the plaintiff, Arthur Hayes, competent and credible. Eric twitched, his shoulders jerking like he'd been struck. The judge continued, voice even but heavy. The quitclaim deed presented by the defendants is fraudulent and hereby void. Ownership of the property is restored to Arthur Hayes. Eric Hayes is barred from access to his father's finances, accounts, or estate. Carla whimpered softly, hands trembling. As for Carla Hayes, the judge said, eyes narrowing briefly, your involvement in the scheme is noted. While insufficient for criminal conviction at this time, your role will remain documented. Her face crumpled. Then came the part that cracked the air. Eric Hayes, the judge said, his tone sharp now, you are found guilty of fraud and financial exploitation. This carries sentencing. Deputies take him into custody. The room gasped. Eric shot up from his chair. No, you can't, Dad, tell them this is a mistake. I didn't move, I didn't speak. The deputies grabbed his arms, cuffing him as his voice grew desperate. Dad, please, we're family. Thought he. Family? He used that word like it was a shield. But family isn't blood, it's trust. And he broke that long before the gavel struck. As they dragged him past me, his eyes locked on mine, pleading. I gave him nothing back. Not anger, not pity, just silence. Carla sat frozen, tears streaking her face, whispering, what do we do now? What do we do? But Eric was already gone, his shouts echoing down the hallway. The judge's voice cut through the air again. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck once, hard, final. The weight I'd carried for months, the weight of being erased, silenced, mocked, lifted in that single sound. Neighbors began to murmur. Mrs. Turner wiped her tears. Hank clapped my shoulder. Reverend Johnson leaned close. Justice has its own sound, Arthur. Today you heard it. I nodded, throat tight. Jack leaned in, voice low. You won, Marine, without firing a shot. Flashback. I remembered the quiet after firefights overseas, the moment when smoke cleared, when you counted who was left, when you realized you were still standing. This was the same quiet, different battlefield, same survival. I stood slowly, cane steady against the polished floor, and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted, some nodding, some whispering, some offering small smiles. But I didn't smile back. Because revenge wasn't about celebration. It wasn't about parading victory. It was about justice, delivered in silence, with paperwork sharper than any blade. Closing thought. They tried to erase me while I slept. They forgot I could still wake. And when I did, I let the law speak louder than any war cry. Some words heal, some cut deep, and some aren't worth reading past the first line. It came on a gray Tuesday, stuffed into my mailbox between bills and a veteran's newsletter. The envelope was thin, scrawled in a familiar hand, slanted, rushed. Eric's handwriting. For a long moment I just stared. My son's words carried from a jail cell to my porch. I opened it, slow, careful, as if it might explode. "Dad," it began, "I just wanted security. You don't understand how hard it's been. I never meant to hurt you. Carla pushed me. The stress. The money, it got out of control. I thought you'd forgive me like you always have." Page after page. Excuses dressed as apologies. Hollow phrases like, "I was only trying to protect the family, and we all make mistakes." No mention of the forged deed. No acknowledgement of the bronze star they sold. Just weak words circling the truth without touching it. I read every line once, then folded the pages back into the envelope. My chest felt heavy, not with anger, but with the weight of wasted chances. That evening, Jack stopped by. He found the envelope on my table, untouched since the morning. "You gonna answer?" he asked. I shook my head. Answer what? Excuses, lies dressed up as regret. Jack took the envelope, pulled the letter out, skimmed the first page, then scoffed. "He says he wanted security. You bled in the jungle for security. You worked 30 years for it. He wanted shortcuts. That's the truth." I didn't reply. Thoughtly. Part of me remembered Eric as a boy, clutching my hand at the county fair, his eyes wide at the lights. I remembered teaching him to throw a baseball, to drive the truck, to stand tall when life hit hard. But those memories didn't erase the basement whispers, the forged papers, the locks changed on my own door. Blood ties don't erase betrayal. Jack stepped outside for a moment, then returned with a log for my fireplace. He tossed it in, lit a match, and flames caught fast. "Give me the letter," he said. I handed it over, slow, fingers brushing the edges one last time. He tossed it onto the fire. The paper curled, blackened, words turning to ash in seconds. "Some words don't deserve oxygen," Jack muttered, eyes reflecting the flames. I nodded, staring into the fire. "Some blood doesn't deserve a second chance." The room filled with the crackle of burning paper. The air smelled faintly of smoke and ink. I thought of Margaret again, how she'd tell me forgiveness was noble, that bitterness poisons the soul. But I also remembered her voice when she whispered, "Protect what we built, Arthur. Don't let anyone take it from you." Forgiveness didn't mean opening the door for thieves. When the fire died down, Jack poured us 2 glasses of bourbon. He raised his glass. "To truth," he said simply. I raised mine, "to survival." We clinked glasses, the sound sharp and final, like a gavel in the quiet of my living room. Flashback. I remembered a letter I once wrote Margaret during the war, shaky handwriting in the dim light of a tent. I'd written of fear, of hope, of coming home. Words mattered then. Words saved me. Eric's letter, though, those words were empty shells. As night fell, I placed the empty envelope in the trash. I didn't keep it. I didn't need to. Because closure doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes closure comes from fire. They tried to take everything. My name, my dignity, my home. But they forgot who built the foundation. The morning sun hit the porch just right. I stepped out with the flag folded neat in my hands, red, gold, and pride stitched into cloth. The Marine Corps flag. I hadn't raised it since Margaret passed, but today it went up again. Slow, precise, like we were taught. I could almost hear the drill sergeant bark, "Respect the cloth, respect the country." When the flag reached the top of the pole and snapped once in the wind, I stood still, saluted. The house looked the same from the outside. White shutters, ivy creeping up the brick, but inside it felt different. Mine again. My chair in the corner, Margaret's quilt over the backrest, her photo back on the mantel, Veterans Day, her hand on my arm, that soft smile she wore like armor. I walked past the kitchen, pausing where Carla once sneered about my forgetfulness. The tile still bore the coffee stain she never cleaned. I didn't scrub it out. Some scars belong. Charlie dropped by that afternoon, holding a sack of peaches. "You planting again?" he asked, eyeing the flower beds. "Soon," I nodded. "Margaret always liked the marigolds." He smiled. "Whole neighborhood's talking. Folks say you turned silence into a weapon." I chuckled. "Not a weapon, just a mirror. They couldn't handle their reflection." Thought he. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about remembrance of who I was, of who we were, of what they tried to erase. Rachel from next door brought over fresh pie. Said her son was reading about the court case in civics class. Asked if I'd talk to the class sometime. Imagine that, me, the man they thought was losing his mind, now someone worth listening to. I told her maybe, not for the attention, but for the truth. Later, Jack came by with 2 chairs. He set one beside mine on the porch. "Peace looks good on you," he said. "Feels strange," I replied, not looking over my shoulder, not sleeping with court dates marked on the calendar. He raised an eyebrow. "You earned it." We sat in silence a long time, just the wind and the creak of the porch swing. Flashback. Margaret's last night in this house. She clutched my hand and said, "If they ever try to take this from you, promise me you won't just fade." I had faded for a time, but grief is a fog, not a grave. I went inside after Jack left. Dinner for one, a single plate. Some nights I still set 2, habit or hope, I'm not sure. I sat at the table where Eric once told me to move on, where Carla rolled her eyes like I was a burden. I lit the candle anyway. Margaret liked it lit. As I cleared the dishes, I passed her photo again. I paused, whispered, "We're all right now." And I meant it. Closing thought. They changed the locks, forged the deed, mocked the man I used to be. But I remembered every word, every glance, every betrayal, and I turned them into testimony. Justice isn't loud. It's not a fist on a table. It's quiet, precise, like folding a flag at sunrise. Outside, the flag waved, bright against the fading blue of evening. My flag, my house, my name still on the deed. Not because I shouted, but because I stood. And in standing I was heard.